You are a medieval knight, heavily armoured and highly skilled, and absolutely nothing can stop you on the battlefield. Or so you think. And yet, from hundreds of yards away, a simple piece of wood and string could end you in an instant. For centuries, the longbow dominated the battlefields of England and France. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a revolution in warfare, demanding strength, skill, and years of training. In the right hands, it could turn the tide of battle. But where did it come from? How did it work? And why, after ruling medieval warfare for so long, did it suddenly vanish? The story of the longbow isn't just about a weapon. It's about geography, botany, and a dash of medieval economics. You see, the best longbows were made from yew, a tree that grows all over Europe. But here's the catch. Not all yew is created equal. For a longbow, you need a very particular kind of wood. One where the tough outer sapwood and the flexible inner hardwood combine to create a natural spring, perfect for storing and releasing immense energy. And where do you find just the right conditions for yew trees? That's right, Wales. But why Wales? Well, the climate there, damp yet mild, produced yew with exactly the right balance of strength and flexibility. Add to that the region's long tradition of skilled bowyers, and suddenly Wales becomes the medieval equivalent of an arms factory. And that's why, when the English needed a weapon that could punch through armour at 200 yards, they turned to Welsh yew and the Welsh bowmen, who had already perfected its use. Which, as you might expect, led to centuries of English kings ensuring Wales was always under their control. Not just for strategy, but for the trees. If you were a medieval Englishman, you didn't choose to learn the longbow. It was decided for you before you could even walk properly. To pull back a war bow with a draw weight of over 100 pounds, you needed muscles trained from childhood. And that's why, starting in the 13th century, English laws required every able-bodied man to practice archery. No football, no games, just standing in a field, pulling a bowstring again and again. But this training turned them into a medieval superweapon, able to rain arrows down with such force that even plate armor wasn't always enough. And while you're busy thinking, yeah, but they were just peasants with sticks, let's take a look at the brutal effectiveness of the longbow. It's 1346 and the Battle of Crecy. The French were confident, very confident. You see, they had the elite cavalry, knights, the creme de la creme of medieval warriors. And they believed that if they charged in strong and fast, victory would be theirs. But the English had something else, the longbow. Hundreds, if not thousands of them, lined up on the English flanks, their bows pulled tight, arrows ready to fly. French knights, eager for glory, began their charge, convinced their horses could trample anything in their path. But the English archers, huddled behind defensive positions, unleashed a relentless barrage of arrows that shattered French cavalry formations. The knights were mowed down before they could even reach the English lines. As their horses galloped forward, they fell, struck by hundreds of arrows, and their riders, unable to escape their heavy armor, were quickly overwhelmed. The English longbow had completely neutralized the heavy cavalry that had been the backbone of medieval warfare. And here we have yet another classic case of the longbow rising to the occasion. The English, led by Edward the Black Prince, faced off against the French at Poitiers. And once again, the French cavalry, overconfident in their superiority, charged the English lines. But, once again, the longbowmen were ready, and they rained arrows down upon the charging French with a terrifying precision. This time, it was the same story. The French cavalry couldn't break through, and their own disarray became their downfall. Despite the French once again having the numbers, the longbow created such chaos in their ranks that the battle became a rout, the French king demoralized and overextended, lost decisively, and the Black Prince captured him. It was the longbow, with its constant, unrelenting pressure, that made the difference. Perhaps the most famous use of the longbow was at Agincourt in 1415. We're now in the thick of the 100 Years' War. The English, led by King Henry V, are severely outnumbered. About 5,000 English against 20,000 French. But Henry wasn't worried. He knew that the longbow was his secret weapon. The terrain at Agincourt was a muddy mess. The French knights, again eager for glory, tried to charge, but their heavy armor and horses bogged down in the mud. Meanwhile, the English archers were firing at a steady rhythm, sending wave after wave of arrows that pounded into the French ranks. The knights, heavy and slow, couldn't reach the English positions, and the cavalry was again decimated. But, like all good things, the longbow had its time. And then, like the dodo bird, it vanished. The longbow was eventually outclassed by something with a bit more bang. The gunpowder revolution made the longbow look like a fun but outdated hobby. Kind of like trying to use a quill and ink in a world of computers. Firearms were the new hot thing. No more archers training from the age of 6. Now, you could just hire some guy, hand him a gun, and boom, he's ready to go. No skill required. Except, pointing and shooting. And don't forget cannons, which weren't just about firepower. They were about breaking down fortresses, changing the entire game of siege warfare. The longbow couldn't do that. It was fantastic for open field battles, but when the world started to get industrial, the longbow just couldn't keep up. But it wasn't just technology that got rid of the longbow. Remember the law that you had to practice the longbow? Well, that was no longer the case. And then, as Europe got more urbanized, peasants began to find new ways to spend their free time. Not practicing archery, but doing things like making shoes, selling goods, and not being peasants anymore. And so, the longbow faded into history. It was replaced by firearms, and eventually, it became the stuff of legends. So, the next time you're watching a medieval battle in a movie or a game, just remember, you're not just looking at a bunch of guides of arrows. You're looking at the rise and fall of one of history's most lethal weapons. So what do you think? Could the longbow have kept its place in history, or was it doomed from the start? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to subscribe, because we've got more medieval history coming your way.